I took the night shift at the regional USPS center because I needed something quiet, and I needed it fast. After my brother died that winter, people kept trying to talk to me, like grief was a problem I could solve if I explained it clearly enough. It wasn't. Dead mail felt easier than people. Letters that couldn't be delivered. Packages with no valid return. Things that had nowhere left to go. My job was simple on paper. Open them, log them, decide where they ended up. Archive, return, or destruction. No small talk, no sympathy, just process. On my second night, a gray tray came down my lane that wasn't in the system queue. No barcode, no intake scan, no routing tag. The clerk training me had already told me what to do if that happened. Log it manually and keep the line moving. So I pulled the first envelope, standard white, no return address, my gloves already on. Then I turned it over and saw my full name written across the front in a handwriting I hadn't seen since before the funeral. It had been postmarked the day before. I held it a second longer than I should have, just enough for the line behind me to start backing up. The conveyor doesn't stop unless you stop it, and stopping it means paperwork. So I set the envelope down on the metal table, reached over, and keyed in a manual intake on the terminal. No barcode meant I had to create an entry from scratch. Date, tray origin unknown. Condition sealed. There was a drop-down for reason codes. I hovered over it longer than necessary before selecting UAA. Undeliverable as addressed. It felt wrong typing that with my own name sitting in front of me, but procedure doesn't leave room for interpretation. I logged the item and moved it into my active stack. The clerk who trained me, Ruiz, had said the worst thing you could do on this shift was hesitate. The system expects movement. If you slow down, it starts to look like something's off, even when it isn't. I didn't open it right away. That wasn't a rule, just something I told myself while I worked through the rest of the tray. Standard envelopes, a padded mailer with a broken zipper, a small box that had split at the seam. Most of it was junk once you got inside. Expired cards, old documents, things people stopped needing the moment they lost track of them. I kept my pace steady, logging each item, assigning a final status, moving them off my table. Every few minutes, my eyes went back to the envelope with my name on it. It sat exactly where I'd left it, clean, uncreased, like it hadn't been through the system at all. No sorting marks, no secondary stamps, just the postmark and the address. The longer I waited, the more it started to feel like I was the only part of the process it hadn't gone through yet. Ruiz had walked me through the rules my first night, standing at the end of the lane with a coffee he never seemed to finish. Most of it was common sense, dressed up as policy. Log everything. Don't skip entries. Don't destroy anything without a recorded status. He didn't go line by line, just hit the parts that caused problems if you ignored them. One of those was about items already marked as processed. If the system says it's been opened, you don't open it again unless you were the one who did it. Chain of handling matters more than curiosity. At the time, it sounded like a way to avoid duplicate work. Standing there with that envelope in front of me, I realized it also meant you could end up holding something the system thought was already finished, even when it clearly wasn't. When I finally picked it up again, I turned it over once more, slower this time. The handwriting didn't just look familiar. It matched the way I used to write addresses when I didn't want mistakes. All caps, evenly spaced, pressed harder than necessary so it wouldn't smear. I hadn't written like that since before everything with my brother, before the hospital, before the calls I stopped answering. I checked the corners of the envelope out of habit. No secondary label, no forwarding sticker, nothing to explain how it had ended up here without a proper intake. I glanced at the terminal and pulled up the entry I'd just created. It was there, time-stamped under my ID. For a second, that was enough to steady me. It meant this was just another item in the system now, logged, accounted for, part of the process. I slid the letter opener under the flap and paused again, not because I thought something would happen, but because opening it would make it real in a way I couldn't take back. Ruiz's voice sat in the back of my head, not as a warning, just as routine. Keep the line moving. Don't get stuck on one item. I adjusted my gloves, pressed the blade forward, and cut clean along the edge. The paper inside shifted slightly as the seal gave way. No resistance, no sign it had ever been opened before. I tipped it gently and let the contents slide halfway out. A single folded sheet. No additional inserts, no cards, nothing bulky. Just paper. For a moment, that almost made it easier. Most of the strange things you find in dead mail come with weight. Objects, pieces, things you can't explain right away. This was just a letter. I unfolded it with the same care I used on anything fragile, keeping the crease intact. The first thing I noticed wasn't the words. It was the indentation on the page. Like the pen had been pressed hard enough to leave an impression you could feel through the glove. Then I saw the handwriting. Same as the envelope. Same pressure. Same spacing. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt since the week after the funeral, when everything still came in short bursts you couldn't control. The letter wasn't long. A few lines at most. I didn't read it right away. I just held it there, looking at the way the ink sat on the page, darker in some places where the pen had paused. It felt less like I was about to read something new, and more like I was about to confirm something I already knew. The system chimed behind me, a soft alert that meant my lane was falling behind target pace. I set the letter down, face down this time, and cleared the rest of the tray without looking at it again. Muscle memory took over. Open, log, assign, move. By the time I finished, the alert had cleared, and the next tray was already feeding in. I should have pushed the letter into supervisor review. That's what you do when something doesn't fit cleanly into the categories. But there was no code for this, no checkbox for recognizes handwriting or should not exist. The longer it sat there, the more it felt like passing it off would just delay something I was already involved in. So I logged the envelope as opened under my ID and moved it into the review stack at the edge of my station, within reach. When I finally read it, the first line didn't say my name. It didn't need to. It started mid-thought, like a conversation that had already been going on somewhere else. The wording was plain, nothing dramatic, no attempt to sound like anything other than what it was. That made it worse. I read it once, then again, slower, making sure I wasn't filling in gaps that weren't there. The handwriting didn't change. The spacing stayed consistent all the way through. Whoever wrote it hadn't hesitated. I became aware of the room again only after I finished. The steady hum of the conveyors, the soft impact of trays shifting along the line. Everything around me was still moving exactly the way it should. The only thing that didn't fit into that movement was the page in my hands. I folded the letter back along its original crease and slid it into the envelope, pressing the edge flat, like that would return it to some earlier state. On the terminal, the item sat under my active session, marked as opened, waiting for a final status: archive, return, or destruction. That was the whole job. I hovered over the options without selecting anything. None of them felt correct, but leaving it incomplete would flag it for review at the end of the shift. Eventually, everything has to go somewhere. I selected archive. It was the closest thing to doing nothing. The system accepted the input without delay, updated the status, and moved the item out of my active queue. For a second, I thought that was it. Then, the next tray came down the line, and right on top, in the same position as before, was another envelope with my name on it. I didn't touch the new envelope right away. That was the first mistake I corrected without thinking. Hesitation slows everything down, and I could already feel the line adjusting around me, like it was compensating for a delay it couldn't log. I cleared 2 items before reaching for it: a torn catalog and a padded envelope with nothing inside but a receipt. Normal things, the kind you can finish without remembering them. Then I picked up the letter with my name again. Same white envelope, same weight, same handwriting. I turned it over, expecting to see a different postmark this time, something that would at least suggest a sequence. It was identical. Same date, same ink stamp. No additional markings, no sorting codes, nothing that explained how it had moved through the system twice without changing. I pulled up the previous entry on the terminal. The first letter was already archived under my ID, time-stamped less than 3 minutes earlier. Closed, processed, complete. There was no duplicate entry, no second intake, no indication that another item with the same address had entered the system. What I was holding didn't exist in the log. That alone should have been enough to stop the line and call a supervisor. Instead, I created a second manual entry, matching the first as closely as I could. Same description, same condition. My fingers moved faster this time, like keeping the process intact mattered more than understanding it. The system accepted the entry without hesitation. For a moment, that felt like confirmation. If it could be logged, it could be handled. That's how it works. I checked the status field before opening it. The drop-down populated automatically with the usual options, but above them there was already a line filled in. Opened. I hadn't touched it yet. The seal was intact, the edge clean, no signs of tampering. I refreshed the screen once, then again. The status didn't change. It still showed as processed under my ID, with a timestamp that hadn't happened yet. I compared it to the clock in the corner of the monitor. The system said I had opened the letter 2 minutes in the future. I sat there for a second, not moving, trying to decide if this was a display error or something deeper in the logging. Ruiz had said not to correct system-assigned statuses you didn't enter yourself. At the time, it sounded like a safeguard. Now, it felt like a boundary. I left the status as it was and opened the envelope anyway. The cut was clean, identical to the first. Inside, another single sheet. Same paper, same weight, same fold. When I unfolded it, I noticed the indentation again before I read the words, like the page had been written with enough pressure to carry through multiple layers. The handwriting matched exactly. No variation, no drift. The first line picked up where the last letter had left off, not repeating it, not referencing it, continuing it like I had stepped away from a conversation and come back without missing anything. I read it once, then again, slower, looking for any sign that I was misreading it, that there was some pattern I was forcing into place. There wasn't. It was consistent all the way through. I checked the terminal again before folding the page back. The item still showed as opened, processed, under my ID. The future timestamp hadn't updated. It stayed where it was, fixed, like it had already happened, whether I matched it or not. I hovered over the status options again. Archive didn't feel right this time. It felt like closing something that wasn't finished. Return didn't apply. There was no sender, no path back. Destruction would remove it from the system, but the first letter had already proven that removal didn't mean anything here. I left the status unchanged and moved it to the side of my station, separate from the rest of the review stack, not because that was procedure, but because it felt like mixing it in would lose whatever pattern was forming. The next few items moved through my hands without staying in my head. A stack of greeting cards, all unsigned. A small box with a broken watch inside. The hands stopped at a time that didn't match the shift. I logged them, assigned statuses, cleared them off my table. Every few minutes, I checked the edge of my station to make sure the letter was still there. It didn't move. It didn't change. It just stayed within reach, like it was waiting for the next step in a process I hadn't agreed to follow. The system behind me kept its pace steady. No additional alerts, no flags. If something was wrong, it wasn't visible from the metrics they tracked. As far as the building was concerned, everything was working. About an hour into the shift, Ruiz passed behind my lane again. He didn't stop this time, just slowed enough to glance at my station. His eyes moved over the trays, the terminal, the stack of processed items. When they reached the separate pile at the edge, he paused for a fraction longer than everything else. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to register. "You good?" he asked, already moving past me. It wasn't a real question. It was the kind supervisors use to check for problems without inviting them. "Yeah," I said, because that was the correct answer if you wanted the line to keep moving. He nodded once and kept walking. He didn't ask what was in the stack. I didn't offer. When I turned back to the terminal, a new entry had appeared at the top of my active queue. I hadn't created it. No intake, no manual log, no scan, just a line of text with the same description I'd been using, auto-filled, already assigned to my station. The status field was blank this time, no future timestamp, no pre-filled opened, just waiting. I looked down at the conveyor. Another gray tray was feeding in, identical to the first. Same lack of routing tag, same absence of any identifying marks. The system had accepted it without question. I reached for the first envelope in the tray before I could think about whether I should. This one felt slightly different in my hand. Not heavier, not thicker, just enough variation that I noticed it. I turned it over and saw my name again. Same handwriting, same spacing. I checked the postmark out of habit. It had changed. Not the date, the location. The first two had been stamped out of a local distribution center I recognized. This one came from a different state entirely. The ink was lighter, the edges of the stamp less defined, like it had gone through a different machine. That was the first time the pattern broke. Not in a way that explained anything, but enough to show it wasn't static. Whatever was feeding these into my lane wasn't just repeating the same item. I didn't log this one right away. Instead, I opened the previous letter again, sliding the page out and unfolding it on the table. Then I opened the new envelope beside it. The handwriting matched across both pages, line for line, pressure for pressure. The second page didn't restart the message. It continued it, same tone, same pacing, no gaps. I read across them without lifting my eyes, the way you read something you don't want to lose track of. When I reached the end of the second page, I stopped. There was space left below the last line. Not much. Just enough for a few more sentences. The kind of space you leave when you know you're not finished yet. I didn't stack the pages right away. I kept them spread across the metal table, edges aligned, making sure nothing overlapped, like the spacing itself might reveal something I was missing. The handwriting didn't drift between pages. Same pressure, same spacing, same deliberate strokes, like whoever wrote it never had to stop and think. That was the part that didn't feel human. Real writing always carries hesitation somewhere. A pause, a correction, a slight change in pressure when a thought shifts direction. This didn't. It read like something that had already been completed before it ever touched the paper. I went back to the terminal and checked the entries again, forcing myself to look at something structured, something that followed rules. The system still showed only 2 completed items under my ID. The third envelope, the one I was holding, still didn't exist anywhere in the log, like it hadn't entered the building at all. I created the entry manually, slower this time, checking each field before confirming it, like accuracy would keep it anchored inside the system. Tray origin unknown. Condition sealed. No return address. I copied the same description I had used before, keeping it identical on purpose, removing any variation that might give it room to behave differently. When I hit confirm, the terminal paused longer than usual. Not frozen, just held, like it was verifying something against a process I couldn't see. Then the entry appeared. Same format, same layout, everything where it should be. For a moment, that steadied me again. If it could be entered, it could be processed. That was the logic the whole building ran on. I moved to the status field. It wasn't blank. Opened was already there, filled in before I touched it, with a timestamp 3 minutes ahead of the system clock. I didn't refresh the screen this time. I left it exactly as it was and opened the envelope. The motion felt too familiar now, like I was repeating something instead of doing it for the first time. Blade under the flap, steady pressure, clean cut along the edge. The seal gave way without resistance. Inside, the paper shifted forward slightly, stopping halfway out, the same as before. I slid it out fully and unfolded it carefully, keeping the crease intact. Instead of reading from the top, I went straight to the bottom of the page, where the previous letter had left that narrow strip of empty space. It wasn't empty anymore. The new text filled it exactly, continuing the line without any visible break, like the page had always been complete, and I was only seeing it in sections. I read all 3 pages in sequence without stopping, letting the words run together into a single continuous piece. The tone stayed consistent the entire way through. No urgency, no emphasis, nothing that tried to draw attention to itself. That was what made it harder to dismiss. It didn't feel like a message trying to be read. It felt like something being recorded. The details tracked too closely to what I had already done, not predicting in a vague way, not suggesting, aligning. The first page matched the start of my shift. The second followed the moment I opened the first envelope. The third moved into what I was doing now, close enough that it felt like I was staying in sync with it, instead of leading anything myself. When I reached the end, there was space again, same size, same shape, waiting. I checked the terminal again, needing something outside the paper to confirm I was still inside a system that followed rules. The third entry was there, marked as opened, timestamp unchanged. Beneath it, a new line had appeared in my active queue. No intake, no description, just a placeholder tied to my ID, sitting where the next item should be. I hadn't created it. There was no scan, no manual input, no reason for it to exist. Still, it was positioned exactly where the workflow expected it. I looked down at the conveyor. Another gray tray was already feeding toward my station, identical to the others, moving at the same steady pace. No alarms, no interruptions. Whatever was happening wasn't breaking the system. It was being processed like everything else. I gathered the pages and aligned them into a single stack, pressing them flat before sliding them back into the envelope. The movement felt automatic, like returning something to a state the system could recognize. I logged the item as processed without selecting a final outcome. That should have triggered a flag. Every item requires closure, archive, return, or destruction. Leaving it incomplete should have forced a review. The system didn't respond. It accepted the entry as it was and moved it out of my active queue, placing it somewhere outside the part of the workflow I could see. That absence felt intentional, not an error, not something missed, just a step I wasn't included in anymore. The next envelope came through in the same position as before, top of the tray, centered like it had been placed there deliberately. I watched my own hands as I reached for it, checking for hesitation. There wasn't any left. The motion was clean, direct, controlled. I keyed in the entry before opening it, not looking at the screen as I filled out the fields. When I glanced up, the status was already filled in again. Opened. This time, the timestamp was further ahead. 5 minutes. The gap between what I was doing and what the system said I had done was increasing, stretching in a way that made it harder to tell which one was actually leading. I opened the envelope without stopping. Same cut, same pressure, same single sheet inside. When I unfolded it, I didn't need to check where to look anymore. My eyes went straight to the bottom of the page, to the space that had been left for what came next. It was filled again, continuing the line without interruption. I read it once, then again, slower, tracing each word carefully, looking for any shift in tone or structure that would suggest this was something other than what it appeared to be. There wasn't anything, no variation, no hesitation. It didn't behave like writing. It behaved like a record being updated in real time, except the update was always ahead of me. The room came back into focus in pieces while I stood there holding the page. The steady hum of conveyors, the soft impact of trays shifting along the line, a forklift moving somewhere deeper in the building, the sound echoing off the metal walls, and fading into the background. Everything remained consistent, unchanged, operating exactly the way it was designed to. No one nearby slowed down. No one looked over. From the outside, my station would have looked normal. A worker keeping pace, clearing items, maintaining flow. The difference only existed in the small space between my hands and the table, where the envelopes kept appearing without entering the system the way they were supposed to. I looked back at the terminal and saw the placeholder entry had updated again. It now matched the envelope I was holding. Same description, same status, same future timestamp. I hadn't entered any of it. The system had filled it in on its own, aligning itself with what was happening at my station. For a moment, I considered stopping the line, forcing a break in the process, making someone else step into it and explain what I couldn't. But the thought didn't hold. Stopping wouldn't remove the envelopes. It wouldn't change the pages. It would just add another layer of handling on top of something that was already ahead of me. I folded the letter back along its crease, set it down, and reached for the next item in the tray without checking the time. By the time I reached the next envelope, the motion felt less like a choice and more like something I was matching, not following, not copying, aligning. I keyed in the entry before touching the seal, keeping my eyes on the screen this time, watching for any change in how the system responded. The fields filled the way they were supposed to until I reached the status line. It didn't wait for input. Opened appeared again. The timestamp, now 6 minutes ahead of the clock in the corner. I didn't look away from it right away. I let the number sit there, fixed, like it had already been confirmed somewhere else. Then I lowered my hand, slid the blade under the flap, and cut it open in one clean motion, matching the time the system had already recorded. Inside, the page shifted forward the same way it had every time before, stopping halfway out as if it expected to be handled in a specific way. I pulled it free and unfolded it, already knowing where my eyes would land. The bottom line was filled again, continuing without a break. What changed this time wasn't the writing. It was the detail. The sentence described the exact motion I had just made, the way I had watched the timestamp before opening the envelope, the way I had waited instead of rushing it. It didn't read like observation. It read like confirmation. I went back to the previous page and checked the line before it. It ended exactly where this one began, with no overlap, no repetition, no gap. Whatever this was, it wasn't catching up to me anymore. I checked the terminal again, not expecting it to correct itself, just needing to see if anything had shifted. The entry for the current envelope showed as completed, even though it was still open in front of me. Not just opened, completed, final status assigned. I hadn't selected one. I moved the cursor over the record and opened the details. The system had already chosen for me. Archive. Time-stamped 1 minute ahead of the opened time. The sequence was clean, orderly, exactly how a normal item would appear once it was finished. The difference was I hadn't done any of it yet. For a moment, I stayed there, looking at the completed record, trying to reconcile the order of actions with what I was physically holding. I folded the page back along its crease and slid it into the envelope, slower than before, paying attention to each movement like it might interrupt something if I rushed it. Then I hovered over the status options, even though the system had already made the choice. Archive was selected, locked. I couldn't change it. The option was grayed out, uneditable. That hadn't happened before. Normally, you could override a status if you caught it early enough. I tried clicking it anyway, just to see if the interface would respond. Nothing. The entry was fixed, completed, removed from my control. I let my hand drop back to the table and watched the item disappear from my active queue, like it had been cleared without me. The next tray arrived without delay, feeding into my lane at the same steady pace. No slowdown, no gap, nothing to indicate that anything had changed. I reached for the first envelope automatically and stopped halfway through the motion. For the first time, I didn't recognize the handwriting immediately. It still looked familiar, but not in the same direct way as before. The spacing was slightly tighter, the pressure uneven in places, like whoever wrote it had hesitated for the first time. I turned it over and checked the postmark. Different again. Another state, another processing center. The pattern wasn't just continuing, it was expanding. I keyed in the entry before I could think too much about it, watching the screen as the system accepted it without delay. The status field stayed blank for a full second. That hadn't happened since this started. I kept my eyes on it, waiting for the usual shift, for opened to appear ahead of me, like it had every time before. It didn't. The cursor blinked, steady, patient, like it was waiting for me to decide something on my own. I felt that pause more than anything else that had happened so far. Not because it was clearer, but because it was different. For the first time, the system wasn't ahead of me. It was holding position, leaving the next step open. I lowered my hand, slid the blade under the flap, and stopped just before applying pressure, aware that whatever came next might not be recorded until I made it happen. I opened the envelope slowly, not matching any timestamp this time, just moving at my own pace. The cut wasn't as clean as before. The blade caught slightly on the edge, leaving a small tear where the paper resisted. I noticed it immediately. It broke the pattern. Inside, the page didn't slide forward on its own. I had to tilt the envelope to get it to move. When I unfolded it, the indentation was still there, but lighter in places, uneven where the pressure had shifted. I went to the bottom of the page and saw the space waiting again, not filled this time. Blank. I stayed there for a second, looking at it, expecting the text to appear the way it had before, without me doing anything. I read from the top, instead. The lines matched the sequence up to the point where the previous letter had ended, then stopped cleanly, leaving the rest of the page untouched. No continuation, no alignment with what I was doing now, just a pause. I checked the terminal. The status field was still empty. No pre-filled entry, no future timestamp. The system was waiting. I looked back at the blank space on the page and felt something shift, not in the room, not in the workflow, but in how the process was behaving. Until now, everything had been ahead of me, fixed, predetermined. This was the first time it had left something unfinished, like it needed me to complete it before it could move forward again. I set the envelope down and looked at my hands, the gloves still clean, except for the slight tear in the paper edge. The line behind me continued without interruption, no alerts, no slowdown, nothing to indicate that I had paused longer than usual. From the system's perspective, nothing had broken. The only difference was the absence of instruction. No status, no timestamp, no continuation on the page. I moved the cursor back over the entry and hovered on the status field. Archive, return, destruction. The same three options, unchanged. For the first time since this started, the choice wasn't already made. It was waiting for me. I didn't select anything right away. Instead, I picked the page back up and held it under the light, angling it to catch the indentation left by the pen. The pressure marks were there, faint but consistent, extending into the blank space below the last written line. I traced them with my eyes, not touching them, just following the impression as it moved across the page. There were words there, not visible in ink, but pressed into the paper hard enough to leave a path. I couldn't read them fully, not without changing the angle again and again, but I didn't need to. The shape of the lines was enough. Whatever was supposed to be written next was already there. It hadn't been filled in yet. I didn't put the page down this time. I kept it in my hand, holding it under the fluorescent light, shifting the angle just enough to follow the indentation without losing it. The impressions were consistent, pressed deep enough to carry through the fibers, like whoever wrote it didn't intend to hide anything, just delayed when it would become visible. I moved it slightly left, then right, tracking the lines as they formed words I couldn't fully read but could still recognize in shape. It wasn't random pressure. It was structured, aligned with the way the previous pages had been written. I checked the terminal again without lowering the paper. The entry was still waiting. No status, no timestamp, nothing filled in ahead of me. For the first time since this started, the system wasn't leading. It was holding position, like it needed me to complete something before it could continue. I set the envelope down flat and placed the page beside it, keeping the angle consistent so the indentation stayed visible. Then I moved the cursor over the status field again. Archive, return, destruction. The same three options, unchanged, but they felt different now. Not like outcomes, but like inputs. I hovered over archive first, remembering how the system had locked it before, how it had assigned it without waiting for me. This time it didn't move. Nothing filled in ahead of me. No timestamp appeared. I clicked it. The system didn't respond immediately. There was a delay, longer than any I had seen so far, just enough to make me aware of the pause. Then the status filled. Archive. The timestamp appeared a second later, matching the exact moment I made the selection, not ahead of it. The page in front of me didn't change right away. I kept my eyes on it, waiting for the blank space to fill the way it had before, expecting the continuation to appear without any movement from me. Nothing happened. The indentation remained the same, faint lines pressed into the paper, still unreadable without shifting the light. I adjusted the angle again, slower this time, following the impressions across the page. As I moved it, the words started to separate just enough to make sense. Not fully, not cleanly, but enough to recognize structure. Short lines, same spacing, same rhythm as before. It wasn't new writing. It was already there, just not visible in ink yet. The system hadn't generated it. It had been pressed into the page before I ever opened it. I checked the terminal again, expecting the entry to be completed and removed from my active queue. It wasn't. The item stayed in place, marked as archived but still visible, like it hadn't moved through the final step of the process. That wasn't how it worked. Completed items clear automatically. They don't sit in the queue once the status is assigned. I opened the details and looked at the timeline. The sequence was there. Opened, archived, both timestamps matching exactly when I had performed the actions, No future entries, no pre-filled steps, just a clean record, aligned with what I had done. It looked normal for the first time since the shift started. That should have made it easier. It didn't. It meant whatever was happening had shifted from leading the process to waiting on it. I reached for the next envelope in the tray and stopped before touching it. For a moment, I just looked at it sitting there, centered, unmarked, except for the handwriting across the front. Same style, same pressure, but not identical anymore. There were small variations now, slight differences in spacing, a letter pressed harder than the others, a line that dipped lower before correcting itself. It looked more human, less fixed. I keyed in the entry without breaking eye contact with the envelope, filling in the fields from memory. When I moved to the status field, it stayed blank again. No pre-fill, no future timestamp, just waiting. The system wasn't ahead of me anymore. It was matching whatever I decided to do next. I opened the envelope carefully, slower than before, making sure the blade didn't catch this time. The seal parted cleanly, and the page inside shifted forward without resistance. I unfolded it and went straight to the bottom. The space was still there, empty, but the indentation had changed. The lines were deeper now, more defined, like the pressure had increased after the previous page. I angled it under the light and followed the impressions across the paper. This time, the words were easier to make out, not fully readable, but close enough to recognize individual letters. They matched my handwriting, not just the style, the exact way I formed certain letters when I wasn't thinking about it. The same small inconsistencies I had noticed in the earlier envelopes were here now, carried into the indentation. I looked back at the previous pages, comparing them side by side with the new one. The earlier writing had been too consistent, too controlled, like it had been produced without hesitation. This was different. The pressure varied. The spacing shifted slightly. It looked like something written in real time, not something completed in advance. I checked the terminal again. The entry for this envelope was still incomplete, waiting for a status. No automatic update, no system intervention. The process had stopped moving on its own. It was holding here, at this point, like it needed me to continue it manually. The difference wasn't subtle. It changed the direction of everything. Until now, I had been catching up to something already finished. Now, it felt like I was the one setting the next step. I hovered over the status options again, feeling the weight of the choice in a way I hadn't before. Archive would move it forward without removing it. Return didn't apply. There was no sender, no path back through the system. Destruction would end it, at least in theory, removing the physical object from the process entirely. I moved the cursor down to destruction and held it there, not clicking, just watching the field, waiting to see if anything would fill in ahead of me. It didn't. The system stayed still. No timestamp appeared, no automatic status, just the empty field and the cursor waiting for input. For the first time since the shift started, there was no indication of what would happen next. I looked back at the page, at the indentation that carried my own writing into a space that hadn't been filled yet. The lines extended across the bottom, consistent in direction, steady in pressure, like the motion had already been completed, even if the ink hadn't been applied. I traced them again with my eyes, slower this time, letting the shapes settle into something I could recognize. The words weren't clear, but the structure was. Short sentences, same pacing, the kind of writing you don't think about while you're doing it, the kind that comes from habit. I realized I had been holding my breath without noticing and let it out slowly, keeping my eyes on the page so I wouldn't lose the pattern. I clicked destruction. The system responded immediately this time. No delay, no pause. The status filled, timestamp matching the exact moment I pressed it. The entry moved out of my active queue, clearing the space on the screen. I looked down at the envelope in my hand, expecting it to feel different, lighter, like something had been removed from it. It didn't. It was the same weight, the same thickness, unchanged. I opened it again, without logging a new entry, sliding the page out and unfolding it under the light. The indentation at the bottom was gone, not faded, not shifted, gone completely, like it had never been there at all. I stood there for a few seconds with the page in my hands, waiting for something to replace what had disappeared. The indentation hadn't faded gradually. It was gone in a way that didn't leave a trace, like the paper had never been pressed in the first place. I ran my thumb lightly across the surface through the glove, not enough to crease it, just enough to confirm it was flat. It was. No variation in texture, no remaining pressure marks. I checked the terminal again, even though I knew what I'd see. The entry was gone from my active queue, cleared cleanly, no flags, no pending review. As far as the system was concerned, the item had been processed correctly and no longer required attention. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it felt like something had been removed from the process before I had finished understanding what it was doing. The next tray came down the line without interruption, matching the same steady pace as everything else in the building. No delay, no adjustment, nothing to indicate that anything had changed. I reached for the first item automatically, a small padded envelope with a partial address and a damaged seam. Normal. I logged it, opened it, assigned a status, moved it off my table. Then another. A stack of letters with outdated forwarding labels. A box with a missing inventory slip. All of it moved through my hands cleanly, without hesitation, without anything that required me to stop and think. For a few minutes, the work returned to what it was supposed to be. Predictable, mechanical, the kind of repetition you could lose yourself in if you let it. That almost made it worse, because it felt like whatever had been happening had stepped back on purpose. I didn't look for the next envelope with my name on it right away. I kept my focus on the normal items, maintaining pace, keeping the line clear, letting the routine settle back into place. The terminal showed a steady flow of entries under my ID, each one clean, complete, properly time-stamped. No gaps, no placeholders, no future entries. If someone had walked past my station at that point, they wouldn't have seen anything out of place. That was the part that stayed consistent through all of it. From the outside, the system never broke. It adjusted. It absorbed. It continued. The difference only existed at the point where I was interacting with it, in the space where the process required input instead of just movement. About 15 minutes later, I saw it again. Not at the top of the tray this time, not placed where I expected it. It was halfway down, mixed in with other envelopes, positioned like it had come through the normal intake process. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't been looking for the handwriting. It was the same as before, my name, written in a way that matched how I used to write when I wasn't thinking about it. The spacing was slightly uneven again, the pressure heavier in some letters than others. I pulled it from the stack and held it for a second before logging it, checking the surface for any sign that it had been handled differently than the others. There wasn't anything. It looked like every other piece of mail on the line. I keyed in the entry manually, filling in the fields without rushing, making sure everything matched the way it should. Tray origin unknown. Condition sealed. No return address. When I moved to the status field, it stayed blank. No pre-fill, no timestamp, just the cursor blinking, waiting for input. The system hadn't moved ahead this time. It hadn't lagged behind either. It was holding at the same point I was, like the process had reset itself to match my pace. I rested my hand on the envelope for a moment before opening it, feeling the weight of it through the glove. It didn't feel any different from the others. That was consistent. Whatever changed wasn't in the object itself. It was in how it moved through the system. I opened it slowly, making sure the blade stayed clean along the edge. The seal parted without resistance, and the page inside slid forward slightly as I tilted it. When I unfolded it, I didn't go straight to the bottom this time. I read from the top, line by line, letting the words settle instead of jumping ahead. The tone matched the earlier pages, but the structure had shifted. It wasn't documenting what had already happened. It was describing the way I was moving now, in the present, without getting ahead of me. When I reached the bottom, there was no blank space waiting. The page ended cleanly, without leaving room for continuation. It didn't feel incomplete. It felt finished, but only up to where I was standing. I checked the terminal before folding the page back. The entry was still open, waiting for a final status. No automatic update, no system-generated step. I hovered over the options without selecting anything, watching the field the way I had before, expecting something to fill in ahead of me. It didn't. The system stayed still, matching my position exactly. That was the difference now. It wasn't leading. It wasn't predicting. It was synchronizing. I looked back at the page in my hand, at the way the writing stopped without leaving space for what came next. It didn't need to anymore. Whatever had been ahead of me before had closed the gap. I selected Archive again, not because it felt correct, but because it maintained the process without removing anything. The system accepted it immediately. Timestamp aligned with my input. The entry cleared from my active queue, moving out of view the way completed items were supposed to. I watched the screen for a second after it disappeared, expecting something else to take its place, some kind of continuation or placeholder like before. Nothing appeared. The queue moved on to the next item, a standard envelope with a damaged corner and a partial address. I processed it without thinking, letting the routine carry me forward while I waited to see if anything would break the pattern again. It didn't happen right away. The next several items moved through cleanly, each one logged, opened, and assigned without interruption. The system stayed aligned with my actions. No gaps, no future entries, no delays. For a moment, it felt like whatever had been happening had ended, like the process had corrected itself once I stopped letting it move ahead of me. That thought held just long enough to feel almost reasonable. Then I noticed something small on the terminal, something I wouldn't have seen if I wasn't still watching the screen more closely than usual. A new entry appeared at the bottom of the queue, not assigned to my lane yet, just listed as incoming. No description, no intake, just a name in the address field. I didn't need to scroll to read it. It was visible where it sat, aligned with the rest of the entries, formatted the same way, nothing about it standing out except what it said. It wasn't my name this time. It was Ruiz's. The rest of the fields were blank, waiting to be filled the same way mine had been earlier in the shift. I looked down the line and saw him at the far end of the floor, moving between stations, checking screens, keeping everything in place the way he always did. From where I stood, nothing about him looked different. The system didn't flag the entry. It didn't assign it to a lane yet. It just held it there, in the queue, waiting for it to move into the process. I looked back at my station, then at the screen again, and kept my hands where they were. I didn't move right away after I saw Ruiz's name in the queue. The line kept running, steady as before, trays shifting forward, items passing through hands that didn't stop or slow down. For a few seconds, I just stood there with my hands resting on the edge of the table, feeling the vibration of the conveyor through the metal. Then I reached for the terminal and pulled up my completed entries again. Not because I expected anything to change, but because I needed to see them in the same order they had been recorded. Everything looked normal at first. Clean sequence, correct timestamps, no gaps, no flags, no unresolved items. I opened the last entry and scrolled through the details slowly, line by line, until I reached the section that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't part of the standard record. It wasn't labeled the way the other fields were. Just a single line added at the bottom, filled in without any input from me. Handwriting, confirmed, source, internal, logged under my ID. I kept looking at it, waiting for it to correct itself or disappear, the way a display error sometimes does if you give it a second. It didn't. It stayed exactly where it was, fixed, like it had always been part of the record. I closed the entry and let the screen return to the queue without touching anything else. Ruiz's name was still there, unchanged, waiting to move into a lane. I kept my hands on the table and didn't reach for the next item when it arrived. The system didn't stop. It adjusted around me and kept going. When the city sleeps, it notices who doesn't.